We are joined by former Universal Orlando actor Ronald Fox
to discuss his time at Universal working on such things as the
Wild West Stunt Show and T2 3D.
This is episode 570 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast. Hello, everybody. I am Michelle, your host for today. And with me, I have a couple of regulars as well as a couple of fun guests. So going forward, we've got Mr. Chris.
Hello.
And Mr. Lee.
Hello on.
And we've got two more misters. Tracy, I need you back.
She's coming.
Testosterone heavy episode.
It's not long.
It's been testosterone heavy for 2 months going on. So, and with me, I also have John.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, John. And then we've got our special guest, Mr. Ron Fox.
Oh, my goodness. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Ron. Thanks for joining us. I know, Chris, I said to you before we started recording, Chris has been desperate to set this up for such a long time, and we finally made it happen, and I'm super excited to talk about. Like, talking to anyone that's worked behind the scenes at Universal is such a cool experience because you get to learn, I've said this before, as theme park nerds, we don't know a lot of that behind the scenes stuff, but then learning that behind the scenes stuff just enhances visiting the parks.
Yeah. It does.
And even to add to that, right? So a lot of the episodes that we have done before with previous, team members and all that are some of the best, I think, just because we get to hear these fun, cool stories, find out new things that you just typically wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And once I met Ron, we talked a little bit. I'm like, we gotta share this. Like, people love this stuff, so let's bring it to them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I'm thrilled to be a part of that and really continue that narrative forward in whatever way I can.
Yeah, it's in because Disney gets to tell their story, and there's not a lot out there about Universal, and that was one of the things that I wanted to do moving forward when I set UUOP up was to reach out to people and get those behind the scenes stories that you don't get to hear all the time, and it's great. It's so much fun, and it just, like I say, it just enhanced my love of Universal Orlando without a doubt.
For sure. There isn't much literature out there about this either. Disney, there's tons of it. But reading the one about the behind the scenes at the Mummy, that was it was a page turner. I couldn't put it down because I'm such a Universal nerd. I wish there was more out there like that. But since there's not a lot of literature yet, at least we can find cool people like Ron and do podcasts with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. Ron, you want to give us a quick history of who you are and how you came to work on your first job at Universal?
Well, you introduced me. My name is Ron Fox, and how I came by Universal, I went to an open call for the Wild West Stunt Show, and that was back when they still had horses. And, like a lot of people in entertainment, you get used to hearing the word no a great deal. You have to have a thick skin and you have to have confidence in yourself if you're going to succeed, if you're going to see any sort of durational timeline of success in this business. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the easily bruised ego. But I went to this audition, and when I walked in and introduced myself, they're looking at my resume and they look up before I can even start my monologue, Adrian Lepeltier and this.
There's a name. Yes. Love Adrian. Such a shame.
He really is such a crisp individual and in a beautiful, flawless British accent. Yeah. He asked me if I'd ever fallen off a horse. And I said, not intentionally. And that got a great laugh out of them.
Knowing Adrian, he didn't ask it as politely as that, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it was actually, it was exactly that way, believe it or not. I would learn about his more randy and forward nature later when I come to work at the park. But no, that was actually exactly how he asked it. And my monologue was Rowan Atkinson's "A Warm Welcome," which if if you're familiar with Rowan Atkinson and his stand-up stuff, you know it. And if you don't, it's wonderful. He plays the devil, a guy named Toby, and he's welcoming everybody to hell. It's a great bit. And they loved it. Afterward, they asked me about my experience with horses. And I told them, I grew up in Texas and I'd been around horses as far back as I could remember, which is the truth, honestly. That's my earliest memories. They thanked me and they sent me out and told me not to leave, which was always a good sign. And a production assistant came out and she said, so we have 2 dates. We're going to ask you back for a practical where you're going to show if you can actually ride a horse. And I said, sure. What are the dates? And the first one was a Sunday, which was a few days away. And I said, that one. So I showed up and there were 4 of us. And I'm already buzzing because I get to show up and flash my driver's license at the Universal backstage gate, and they got my name, and I don't know where I'm driving, but it's so cool because I'm backstage and I'm driving by the bungalows and making my way past where I need to go, past Jaws, because these things are all still there, right?
What year was that, Ron?
Oh, gosh, 95.
Okay. So,
yeah,
yeah,
95. Wow. So I pull up and the DeLorean was there because I guess they were getting it ready for Halloween Horror Nights. So I park, I walk out, I'm waiting, and Adrian's there with another show director, and they bring a horse out, and they brought out Knucklehead, who was one of the horses that we had stabled, and they said, okay, who wants to get on first? And there's the 4 of us are just standing there. And I went, okay, me. So I climb up on the horse. I check the girth and I check the stirrups, and the wrangler said, I'll help you with all that. And I said, okay, great. So I got on, she adjusted my stirrups, and then I looked at Adrian and the other show director, and I said, okay, what do you want me to do? And they went, just take the horse to the other end of the stage and bring him back. And I went, okay. So I walked the horse down stage left to where the big mine is and did a big loop, came back, and Adrian made a comment about how I was being a little showy by making the horse do a loop down there instead of just coming straight back. And I said, well, he did it, so I'm not going to entirely hold myself accountable. But, I got off the horse. There was only one other guy of the 4 of us who got on the horse, and okay. He didn't seem too terribly confident. One of the guys said, no way, I'm not getting on a horse, even though he knew the audition was to show up and get on a horse.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was that a surprise?
Well, you know what? In the industry, in live shows and film and TV, you'll have a lot of people who will say they can do a thing and then they show up. That's why on the stunt side of the business, there's a saying, don't take the call if you can't do the fall. And this is one part of the industry where you can't fake it till you make it, because that's how people get hurt.
Yeah,
for sure.
But anyway, I got a call the next week to come in and start training. So I was scheduled to train 2 weeks later, and of course I'm super excited. I go through wardrobe. I get costume fitted, and that was back when they were still assigning costumes to you. So you'd get your boots, your jeans, your shirt, your hat, and you would get those things with your name on them, which was really cool. In fact, I know everybody's listening to this and they can't really see, but I'm going to show y'all. This is the very first Brett Taylor hat I ever got.
Awesome.
1995.
Wow.
And what you see on it is all the signatures. Last day of show, we all grabbed our hats and passed them around, and just, so yeah, kind of the Wild West equivalent of, I don't know, a high school yearbook.
That's so cool.
What a great piece of memorabilia to have, though.
Yeah, you won't find that in the prop shop.
No,
it's true. It's tremendous. I love it. I'm thrilled to have it. I keep it. It has a place of honor in my recording studio, and it's tremendous fun. So anyway, that's the short answer of how I wound up as Brett Taylor when we still had horses. And I was doing the show I don't know how far deep you want me to go into this, but I had auditioned for another show at Disney, and their stunt coordinator there said he's not quite ready yet, right?
Okay.
And I was pretty heartbroken about that because I thought I was, but as it turned out, after a week of licking my wounds and feeling sorry for myself, I went to this Universal audition, and it turned out to be a great thing because, of course, I got cast to do Wild West. And about 3 months later, that same stunt coordinator showed up, and he was waiting for me after show, and we had a wonderful talk. And I really appreciated what he had done because I wouldn't have wound up at Universal otherwise. And he said, I knew you would always do it. He goes, you were almost there. And I'm glad you never gave up. And that's just, I think about that moment now, and it's still a goosebumps moment for me. So sometimes you think someone's doing something because they're being mean, or, well, who knows? Maybe they didn't get enough coffee that morning. But reflecting back, I see he knew exactly what he was doing.
That's cool.
Like that rejection put you on the path to something great.
That's correct.
Because he knew you would either be the type of person that would take that rejection and just go, all right, this isn't for me, or spur you on to prove him wrong.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Ron, did you come into the audition knowing you were going for the Brett Taylor role and the villain Cole Hopper role?
I knew I was going for the Brett Taylor role. I knew that because they were auditioning for Wild West. And I obviously, if you look at me, I can't be Ma Hopper. We know that. There's no way. I wouldn't be Felix because that's also a body type and a certain character type, and that's not me. I couldn't be Claude Hopper because he's usually a really, really big guy. So I think they decided with my background, they wanted to put me in Brett. And it's funny you ask about Cole Hopper, because a few months in, probably 5 or 6 months in, one of our show directors had watched my Brett Taylor, and she came to talk to me backstage after show, and she said, what would you say to learning Cole Hopper? And I said, gosh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So she said, okay, we're going to cross train you in Cole Hopper. And what wound up happening, she was so enamored, I guess I can say that, she was blown away by my Cole Hopper to at least such a degree. She said, I'm changing your status. You're now a statused Cole Hopper who can also do Brett. And I said, wait a minute, are you saying I can't do Brett as well? And she goes, no, there's a different level to your Cole. She goes, you do a great Brett Taylor, but let's be honest, Brett Taylor's just the pretty good guy face of the show. And I went, oh, okay. So she told me I'm
what
good.
Are you trying to tell me?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to ask any more questions, or else I'll get an answer I don't want.
So what was it like doing the traction day to day, especially when you had to flip flop between two roles once you were a few months in? What was that like?
Well, typically you would show up and do the same role through the entire run of whatever number of shows you were doing. Okay. There were times where you would move from one to the other. And honestly, the best way I can describe it is clothing makes the character. And when you're wearing that blue cowboy Gene Autry double button yoke shirt, and you've got those jeans on, and you got your cowboy hat and your Wyoming drop sling holster, and you got all those nice muted colors. You feel like a good guy. But you're throwing on, with Cole Hopper, you're throwing on your black jeans and your black shirt and your purple scarf and your black leather vest, and then you grab your little black hat, and you're just remembering, okay, I'm doing something different. I'm a different person. I'm a different character. It's easy as long as you're paying attention. One thing that I will say, anybody out there that's a stunt performer will agree with me. Stunt shows, any kind of stunt show anywhere in the world, is not the kind of performance venue where you can either call it in, or you can daydream, or you can think about what you're doing with your friends afterward. You've got to remain in the moment, because when you don't, that's when you get hurt. But big part of that as well is you're responsible for your own stunts. So you're out there checking your stunts, and it makes it super easy. If you're Cole Hopper, you're checking your high falls, you're checking your boards, your pads, you're checking the wall, you're checking the other things that you're going to be using. If you're Brett Taylor, you're checking the props that you're going to be using, and you're making sure everything is set where it's supposed to be set. And maybe you jump in and help someone else out if they need the help. But because you're setting your props for your gag or your stunt, you're already in that mindset.
Yeah, because I never saw the Wild 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 West stunt show in Orlando. It closed by the time our first visit was there. But I did see, I assume it was a very similar version at PortAventura when Universal owned that in like 1999. And it felt like it was very similar.
Yep. Yeah, it would have been very similar. And it was, the same show in California. Another really amazing thing, and if I'm stealing your thunder because it's a question you're going to ask, I apologize. One of the really cool things now is when I started in the stunt side of the business, especially in theme parks and live shows, people who did theme park stunt shows weren't very highly regarded in Hollywood.
Okay.
Because it was a theme park. And then somebody somewhere said, wait a minute, that person shows up every day. They do 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 shows a day where they get shot off a 3-story building, and they clear a balcony and they land just right and they don't get hurt. Or they get shot off a horse and they hit the ground and they don't get hurt. Or they do a backfall, an 8-foot backfall, blind fall into a well, landing on a pad, and they don't get hurt. Or they're doing these amazing jumps with the Lagoon stunt show that was at Universal, or at Disney, same thing. Some of these people started becoming coordinators in Hollywood. A lot of these people became coordinators. They became doubles. They became highly regarded utility stunt performers who could do whatever was asked of them. Guys that I've worked with or worked at those venues. You got a bunch of people who came out of both of those shows, both the Lagoon show and the Wild West stunt show, who do a lot of coordinating, do a lot of stunt work. People like Dave Morzo. Court Hessler did the water show at Universal. He was the stunt coordinator for Blacklist. So now when you look, and increasingly with film and TV, you will see, if it's a show with driving stunts, I know people in the stunt credits because I probably worked with them either on a film set, or more likely than that, I did the Disney stunt show, Lights, Motors, Action. So there's a lot of credibility now coming out of live stunt shows because of the level of perfection that as artists we achieve every day.
Absolutely. You've got to think, like, doing it for film, it's yes, there's pressure, but you're doing it in front of a live audience multiple times a day. It's got to be perfect.
Right.
Well, obviously we've been talking about the Wild West stunt show, but you also played another part on probably one of the coolest attractions ever. You played the T1000 as part of T2 3D.
I did.
Now, how did you get that role, and kind of how was it different from the Wild West show? And if you could tell us any basic insight, how to perform that show.
How was it different from the Wild West? Well, first of all, the Terminator show, T2, is a dark show, which means it doesn't suck your soul away. It's closed, and like dark rides, like roller coasters that are in buildings are dark rides. Mm-hmm. So T2 is a dark show, and as a result, you don't have that openness that you had at Wild West. It's not gloomy and depressing. It's the entire thing taking place in a building, and the way it's set up because of licensing and other things. At Wild West, we would do meet and greets after the show. You'd go out if you wanted to, if you had the time and you were able to, you'd go after you set your props and say hi to the guest who'd come to see the show. Now, something that was a lot of fun, going back to Wild West, and then I'll jump right back into Terminator, I promise. we were given a fair amount of latitude to carry our character with us through the show and then even to the meet and greet. And I'll never forget, one day I was playing Cole Hopper, and I went over to take a photo with a little kid, right? And his mom was going to take a picture, and a bunch of people, a bunch of adults. They might have been, I don't know. I don't know where they were from, but they pushed their way through the crowd, right up, shoved this kid out of the way to get in front of me, get my autograph, get pictures. And I looked at him and I said, "You need to get in line. I don't have to be nice to you. This ain't Disney."
Yeah.
And they just looked at me. And then I looked at the kid's mom and I said, "Where were we?" And we took the photo, which I thought, and my managers always, they supported that kind of stuff for any of us, as long as you weren't overtly brusque. But with Terminator, there were a lot of things that were very similar to any other show. You would come in, you'd watch the show, and then you would either start training. With Terminator, because of the turnaround, a lot of shows will let you train between shows. You could do that at West. You could do it before the start of day. You could do it at the end of day. But depending how many shows were happening in the span of a day, you usually had a couple hours between shows. You don't have that at Terminator. You've seen the show, so you know, literally, if they're running a tight house, you're watching people leave as you're looking for your seat.
I haven't noticed that, actually.
So yeah, that's how the Terminator house load would work. And it was really, everything was so smartly done. It was very efficient, but lights would be on, set, everything would be reset, and people would be leaving. And you wouldn't, as someone coming in to see the show, you wouldn't have any idea what you were seeing. Nothing was flying into place. Nothing was moving. Everything was ready to go, right? The robots were lined up on either side, 3 deep, and everything's just standing there static. So we would do our training at the end of the day.
Okay.
And I would say the big thing, every single stunt show I've ever been a part of, the biggest, most important thing that you learned about first was the safety piece. And that's pretty obvious as to why that would be. You want to learn that before you do anything else.
Yeah.
So with Terminator, we learned the overarching safety pieces. And then when I trained, it was me and one other guy who were training at the same time in the same role. And the guy that was training us took us on a walk, a tour of the building. And then after that, he took us, basically walked us through where we were going to get to our blocking on stage for our lift appearance. And that was all really fascinating. And then we would talk through what would happen. We would talk through the blocking, because you see it once, but honestly, even if you've seen the show a million times, your adrenaline is pumping and you're overwhelmed because a part of you is going, man, that's going to be me up there, which can be really exciting. So you go through that, right? And for the T1000, the T1000 morphs off the screen and appears on stage, right? You just literally, they do this wonderful 3D effect where this glob of mercury pours onto the stage and the spotlight comes on, and there you are. And you got blocking, and your blocking has to be very, very specific, because if it's not, you could die.
Really?
Yeah, because if you've seen the show, you know that the Terminator comes out on a motorcycle.
Yes.
The Terminator comes out on a motorcycle by way of an apparatus called a zipper. And literally, when you're walking around on the stage, you'd see it when you're looking down. The audience never sees it, has no idea. But it was called a zipper because it was this section of stage that dropped down and slid out of the way, which was only probably about 7 or 8 inches wide. But it is what concealed the track and buzz bar for the motorcycle. So you knew where you had to go. You knew what your blocking had to be. Plus you have the timing you have to be mindful of because people are pointing guns at you. So you're doing that and you're working through all of that. And then you're figuring out your blocking as you take your first gunshot, and then you take your second shots. And when that happens, of course, you're wearing sunglasses. Did I mention that?
No.
Have you ever worn sunglasses in a dark room? If you never have, I take a break right now. If you're listening, grab your sunglasses, go into the bathroom, turn off the light. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And that's exactly what it's like.
Wow.
You're wearing all this great clothing. It's wonderful. You look like a cop, but you're wearing sunglasses inside because that's the character.
So is it like
a dark show?
Yes, it is.
Was there a lot of like muscle memory that went into that, I guess?
It would become that way, but you got to train your body, Chris, to have that kind of muscle memory. If you don't, then you can be sloppy or you can miss your timing, because the other thing is everybody is working off the beats of the music and they're working off the lines that are already laid down. Everything is tracked. The biggest thing, I don't know if it was a muscle memory, but it was the ability I didn't have to move this quickly until I had our daughter, and she has this gene in her where because my wife is a former performer. She did a national tour of Les Mis.
Nice.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I tell people she has the real bragging rights. Me, I just jump off of buildings and gravity does the rest. But our daughter has both of our genes, and when she was like 2 years old, 1.5 years old, she'd think it was funny to climb up on the armrest of the couch and pretend like she was losing her balance. Well, one time she actually did, and I moved like the flash quick to catch her before she hit the ground. I don't know to this day how I did it, but the point of that is the T-1000 appeared on stage by way of a little elevator lift that was maybe 20 inches square.
Right.
Wow.
So wrap your head. It literally was, being trapped in one of those little tunnels they discover in the pyramids. And you're down far enough that you're hoping this thing goes, and you don't know what it's like. You have a dead man switch. Every stunt at Universal that required anything as far as interactivity with the performer, there was a dead man switch, because the dead man switch told everybody that everything was safe. In the T-1000 lift, that dead man switch was a thumb button that was on one of the retractable spring-loaded handles. You held onto these two handles and gripped them on either side, and you would stand crouching, almost like a crouched strongman pose, holding for dear life to these things, because if that button moved even a little, it would stop. And if it stopped, sometimes it would do it on its own. Sometimes it would do it because your thumb moved. You had to hike yourself up the rest of the way and do it with the timing and still look like everything was happening exactly the way it was supposed to. Meanwhile, in your mind, after you've done it for a while, you're cursing yourself out for missing the damn cue or causing your thumb to slide off or whatever happened, so that you didn't actually get the chance to ride the lift all the way up flush with the stage. But you go up, and after you've done it for a while, you do develop a certain muscle memory. And what I would do, I wanted my show to always get better. So I would put a video camera up in the booth, in the tech booth, and I would just ask them, I would ask them to turn it on when the house opened so that they wouldn't have to mess with it. And I would watch, and I'd watch because, like I said, I wanted it to be a good show. I wanted it to be a show where the characterizations for the time I was on stage made sense. And sometimes I'd go, okay, that looks better than I thought. And other times I'd see something and go, that looks awful. So you make those decisions based on either the feedback or or a video camera. But yeah, you do the lift, you do the thing, you get shot, the entire console goes down, and then everything else happens on stage until you hear houses loading, and then you go to places for the next show.
Strange, isn't it? Because that's what I love about the perfectionist in people like yourself, that if you missed a beat by like half a second, the average guest wouldn't notice it. But the fact that you're angry that you missed it just shows why Universal and the shows there are as good as they are, because people want to be perfectionists. Yes.
To that point, Lee, it's funny. At Disney, I had the opportunity to be part of the 40th anniversary Traditions facilitation team. If you don't know, Traditions is Disney's version of orientation.
Yeah.
And they bring out a binder that is 5.5 inches thick, full of information. And we have 2 weeks to learn it. And at the end of that 2 weeks, one of the leadership team members said to us, "Hey, they don't know what they don't know, so don't worry if you don't know everything." I'm like, dang it, why didn't y'all tell us this at the beginning? So yeah, Lee, to your point, the audience, they don't know what they don't know. But you have, the classical actor in me has that sense of obligation to make sure I'm out there on stage every single time acting as if everybody in the audience has seen the show for the first time.
Yes.
So it's got to be amazing.
Yeah, and that's the perfect way to look at it, because it might be everyone's first time.
Yeah.
Not the rest of us that have seen it a million times, because we love it that much.
And still watching on YouTube, Lee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Ron, you talked about, the blocking you had to hit and things like that. But were there any changes, maybe subtle ones, made to the shows you worked at Universal over time that the average guests may not have noticed if they hadn't been seeing the show day in and day out like you did?
I would say the biggest change that was not subtle at all happened at Wild West when they took the horse out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it turned out, whoever had made that decision, that decision was obviously made well above my pay grade. And again, one of the individuals who I'd mentioned earlier, Dave Morzo, he asked the most intelligent question of this when we had a stage town hall to talk about what the show was going to look like going forward. And he said, look, the show is not ours to make decisions about, but taking the horse out is like taking a character out of the show. The horse was a character in the show. It was not just a prop. It wasn't just a thing. And it would have been good if we could have that conversation. Now, we created new blocking to reflect not having a horse. And, some people felt it was great. Others said, you got a Wild West stunt show with no horses. It's like having a Corvette with a rubber band instead of an engine. And they didn't necessarily agree. But I think the biggest thing, if you do it right, your contingencies, and every show has contingency training in place. At Terminator, which we're talking about now, that contingency can be, okay, the lift doesn't work for the T-1000. What do you do? The motorcycle doesn't come out. What do you do? The motorcycle comes out and stops. What do you do? There's always, the console doesn't go down. There are all these things. A lot of times the shows that are created as contingency shows are done so because someone thought about that while creating the show. What happens if this doesn't work? Other times, though, it's reactive because we never in our life imagined this would happen. And now it has, and we need to respond immediately. I would say subtly, most of the things that would happen, for example, at Terminator wouldn't typically be noticed. If something did happen that was a change of any kind, you might notice. On the other hand, there were times where the console that Kimberly spoke from didn't go down. So when that happened, you didn't know. If you've never seen the show before, you would assume, okay, that's always been there, because you have no idea. The console disappears beneath the stage, and then there's a sliding section of floor paneling that comes out to fill that space. I just spent 3 minutes. I hope I answered that right.
Well, you kind of did, and it went into the next question was there a special effect at the Wild West show or T2 that was prone to not working properly?
Prone. I think, honestly, one of the challenges that happened at West was the original plan had always been, and it had worked that way for a long time, for many years. We had enough horses that we could rotate them out so the horses could get the rest they needed. Increasingly, though, we had challenges with that. If a horse had an issue, any kind of infection, they need the rest. And when it got to the point where maybe in the span of a week, we might only have horses 1 or 2 days out of that week, and that was a 7-day-a-week show. Mm-hmm. I think that's when the entertainment management team, the directors, decided to look at something else and come up with a dynamic position that put the show in a place where guests wouldn't know the difference. And in them taking out the horses, they created a whole new stunt fight sequence that happened at the very beginning between Felix and Brett. The other stuff, I'm thinking, and I feel everything kind of maybe broke when it was ready to, and it was only rarely when you'd have several things go at the same time. Like you might, I don't recall there ever being a time at Terminator where the lift didn't go and the Kimberly console didn't go down and the zipper didn't drop or the bike didn't come. It wasn't all of those, right? And there was also, because this was a safety piece, and my hat's off to Universal for always being mindful of safety being so important. We had a safety position in place that if for example, if XY happened, we can't do a show. And you tell the audience, and the audience, they were always pretty understanding about it. And honestly, all the time I was there, that happened less than a handful of times where we wound up not being able to do a show because either something wouldn't set, something wouldn't reset, or something happened during show and we had to down the rest of the show.
Yeah. Because you hear that a lot about Jaws, when it had a day where those sharks didn't want to work, they didn't work, like for a whole day.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I was really fortunate when Universal opened. I was studying at Florida Atlantic University, and I was writing for the school newspaper, and one of my colleagues and friends on the paper wound up securing media passes to Universal. So we went to the grand opening where apparently, I guess the day before, there had been a horrible storm which knocked out half the attractions, including Jaws and earthquake. And so they literally had all of these techs seated behind folding tables. I remember riding Earthquake. We're with Robert Wagner and Jill St. John riding Earthquake, and I look up as the ride comes to a stop, and there's 8 people behind a couple of folding tables with computers and everything in front of them. They're literally manually running every single effect that happened in that attraction. And you're right. Jaws, it was almost like Bruce was sentient and decided when he wanted to work and when he didn't.
It's like those animal shows.
PTO in.
Yeah, it's always the animals that don't want to work, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, isn't that the
truth? I know you kind of missed it. I know Chris asked there, Ron, how did you get the job at T2 then? How did that go from the Wild West Stunt Show into moving over to T2?
What happened one day was the same show director who trained me up in Cole Hopper had asked me, she had asked me first about learning the Hitchcock show, because they were casting people who looked a certain way and, a certain body type, but it was the same thing. I guess she looked at me and said, wait a minute, he's the right build and height to be a T1000. So literally one day she asked if I would like to learn that show. And I thought, well, yeah, I didn't honestly know too much about how the show worked at all, but I've always believed the more I learn, the more valuable I become.
Yeah.
And that's how I worked. That's how it worked out for me, learning that show. The Hitchcock show rather wound up going away. So, there I am learning the script, and then I find out they're closing the show, so don't bother. But it was still full speed ahead for Terminator.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned that show, and it worked out pretty well. I'm trying to remember. I feel like there were a few times where I would be done with West, and then I'd wind up going over to Terminator because someone had to leave, or they had a hole they needed to fill. So that was always fun as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Out of the shows you did, Ron, did you have a favorite stunt out of all of the ones, either outside the two shows or just any stunt you did at Universal in general? Is there one that you could pick out as your favorite?
I would definitely say the coal hopper high fall, because the way that high fall worked, the math behind it was brilliant. The fall, from the audience perspective, is it's the end of the show, and Cole Hopper's up there and he's having a fit because his brother and his mom they've both been summarily dispatched, and now he's up there shooting and yelling, and the first thing, I don't even know if this would happen now. Your first shot you get shot in the you presumably you're getting shot somewhere where blood winds up all over the sign, and then you get riddled with bullets, and you do this fall where you clear a balcony, and you basically, it's a header where you're just going head over heels, landing on your back, and you land on a set of boards. The mechanics and the physics behind the fall, we're talking about blocking and marks. From that third story, one of your feet had to always be in a certain position, because the danger with high falls is when people push out, a little bit of travel when you leave your high fall platform can translate into feet at the bottom, and that I've seen people get seriously injured by doing that. So you have to overcome the urge, because below you, the second floor is a balcony, and the thing you don't think about is, because you're doing a header, the height of your body is taller and longer than the width of that balcony. None of that you think about the first time you do that fall. You're just thinking, oh my gosh, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. And you do that, and then with the boards themselves, the way they were set up, the boards were nailed in on one sawhorse, and they were allowed to remain loose on the other, but just held down with a taut piece of rope. And they were strictly, what were we using? We were using 1x6 pine or 1x8 pine, whatever we had. But the pine would bow, and it would dramatically reduce and decelerate your fall, and then they would snap and drop you to the ground, so that you wore a gator back, which is, as it sounds, it's a hardened piece of articulated plastic that it looks like a back brace or a hernia protector someone would wear, except it's got this articulation that runs along the back, and you'd wear it so you wouldn't get splinters or stuff like that. But that fall, when you landed on the ground, it felt like somebody was coming up and smacking you on the back and saying hi to you after not seeing you for a while.
Yeah, it's just such a cool job, isn't it? It's like people don't appreciate it. The average guest coming through don't realize all of this stuff that's going on a daily basis that's putting on this entertainment for people, and it is amazing, honestly, and hats off to people like you for doing this stuff, because it's, I'm sure it's not an easy job.
I've got a friend who I've performed with in several stunt shows, and I've worked with him on film and TV as well. And he shared with me the wisest insight I'd ever heard about the stunt side of the industry. He goes, "This is the only industry in the world that retires you."
Yeah.
That's very true.
For sure. Awesome. Well, let's take a quick ad break and hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Man, we need a vacation.
Oh, I got this.
Whoa, that's awesome. But I was thinking something a little more adventurous.
Okay, how about this?
Yes! Woo! And how about some relaxation for Mama?
Oh, perfect. How did you do that?
Easy. PortKey Vacations.
For your next vacation, let PortKey Vacations take away all the guesswork and stress of planning. From air and hotel to theme park tickets and everything else in between, they've got you covered. Just visit PortKeyVacations.com and touch the PortKey to get started with your free, no-obligation quote request. With just one touch, and PortKey Vacations will magically take you wherever you want to go.
Hello, we are back. Let's continue our conversation with Mr. Ron Fox. I'm going to kick it off with our next question. So, Ron, you were part of many other events at the park, such as playing Men in Black at the opening of the attraction back in 2000. Can you tell us what it was like to be part of the grand opening of an attraction at the parks?
So, and I love this. I'm going to, Michelle, I'll jump into that in a moment, I promise. But I wanted to share something that's really cool about Universal is that the team members that work at some of those attractions have such an amazing vested interest in the attraction that they become subject matter experts on the attraction. And I've heard wonderful stories of people showing up and talking to the right person at Men in Black and then wind up getting a tour, and they get to get photos taken where they're sitting at a computer and there's the aliens in the background. And I mean, stuff like that is just, you talk about taking it next level and peeling another layer off. So I think that's amazing. And while I appreciate the nod and the kudos that people like me get for doing the shows, we're nothing without the attraction operations people, and we're nothing without the techs that are running everything, because let's be honest, it's almost like if you're a rock star in a rock band, your audio guy and your lights guy, or girl, they're the ones that are going to make you look good, or they're going to make you sound terrible. Mm-hmm. So they're all about taking care of you. And then of course we wouldn't be doing a damn thing if it weren't for the guests.
Very true.
That's for sure. Men in Black. I wound up getting tapped by the show director who was directing that, and every time there's any kind of a media event, a grand opening of an attraction, a restaurant, a show, you name it, there's always a show director who basically it's their baby from inception to build to presentation. And that's what happened with me. And there was a bunch of us, and quite a few of us, because again, we kind of, I think number one, we all sort of were the right height to fit the clothes they had for us. I don't think they were looking for very, very specifically. I mean, you had to be relatively in shape or thin in your suit, but it was a lot of rehearsal and choreography for what was going to happen, which was show excitement and then ultimately blowing the wall apart. And it actually fell on me. They gave me this air cannon rifle weapon thing that they had created, and it was supposed to deliver such a blast of air that it somehow was going to deliver this concentrated blast that was going to knock a hole in the styrofoam, right? These blocks of styrofoam have been built up, and everything works except that. Even during rehearsals, it doesn't work. So I'm ready for it not to work and pretend like it's going to. And of course, on the day of the grand opening, press event, it doesn't work. But I don't honestly, if people are paying attention to me, I'm doing something wrong, because everybody's there to see Will Smith,
yes.
Right? Oh yeah. I'm who am I? I'm just a guy, and again, wearing sunglasses and a black suit. the story of my life at Universal. But,
common theme here.
Yeah, at least you were outside this time.
Right. Yeah, glasses. But yeah, Will was awesome, and everybody seemed to have a great time. It's always fun being a part of the collaborative process, whether you're talking about launching a stunt show, a live show, whether you join one that's already been going, whether you're part of one that you're going to grand open, film, TV, it's all the same. You come together for this project with the sole purpose of plugging all these modular components into place, and hopefully you get something nice that comes out of the back end.
I mean, I think it's testament to the things that you've worked on that they lasted a long time. You know, Men in Black's still there. T2 was open for a long time. The Wild Wild West Stunt Show was there for a long time. It's like you should be very proud of what you've achieved working at Universal.
I thank you for that. I have had a wonderful time. I've been a part of some incredible stage shows and some amazing opportunities. And I think the testament there is relationship building, connecting with people. That's how these things come to pass, because I've been on projects where people who maybe didn't have all the skills necessary were still brought on board because they could learn and they had the right attitude. And I've been on other projects where, you know, someone's resume did loops around mine, but their attitude was terrible. And you know, the hiring team wanted no part of them.
Interesting.
Now, yeah, I mean, does what I say make sense? That it sounds kind of corny, like the thing you'd see on a motivational poster, but I feel like in any business, and this is no different, your attitude equals your altitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always tried to make sure I've got a great attitude, and if I don't understand things, I ask. But I think that's been a key component. I like getting to know people and build relationships, and that's really what's been an essential component to me being able to talk about the things that I talk about with you, and for anyone who looks at my resume and says, okay, you've done a thing or two.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, you know, opportunities and projects that you've worked on. So you've been part of music videos recorded at the parks. Could you tell us about those or any?
So I never worked on any of the music videos. They always knew people who were working on them, but I was a part of commercials and industrials that were shot at Universal. I never worked on any of the music videos, but what's an amazing thing is, you know, Universal and any theme park that has a residential area, you know, they can control everything. They can control the traffic. The only thing they can't control is the weather. And I know one of the Creed videos, they had to create this big body of water, and the biggest problem wasn't the talent. It was they had a hard time containing the water. No matter where they kept putting the tarps and the drops down to keep the water in, it would always find a new place. I think that's anywhere, though. Anywhere I've ever worked on a project that has had water, there's always leaks. There's water's going everywhere you don't want it to.
Of course.
But a lot of industrials and commercials have been shot at Universal because there's most of the facades actually, you know, they're flat. There may not be nothing behind them, but some of those buildings actually have rooms built on the back so that if a crew comes in and they need to shoot something, maybe they need to dress up the inside of that, they can. So not every facade is just a door that leads to an unfinished open air space.
I would love to get in behind some of those and see some of those rooms.
I was about to say that. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ron, you're talking about some of those side projects, and then you even touched on earlier, like having worked a little bit on the Hitchcock show, just, you know, off the scenes before it went away. Were there any other special projects outside of the two stage shows and ride openings that you can tell us about that you were part of at Universal?
Yes. So we Universal has Mardi Gras, and when we still had the horses, we would do we would do the walk in the Mardi Gras parade with the horse. And one of my fellow performers always called it the walk of shame, which I thought was hysterical. She was like, "Hey, we've been reduced to wrangling the horse in a parade," and she goes, "I'm surprised they don't have us also carrying a broom and dustpan to pick up the poop." As you could tell, she wasn't a huge fan of it, but I think honestly, they wanted the horse in the parade. I think so we made it happen. There were times where we'd get to, if they didn't have enough people or couldn't find enough people to throw beads, they'd pull you to do that. The Thanksgiving Day parade is another one where I believe now guests can sign up to be a parade float handler. Is that correct? I feel like
that's for
I feel like I read that
Christmas one,
somewhere.
isn't it?
Am I correct on that?
I don't think they do it anymore, but I know they used to for the Christmas. That was for the holiday parade. I'm not sure. I think it's all
They
team.
stopped that?
I haven't seen anywhere on the internet over the last few years of people, how people go crazy trying to get on the parade floats for Mardi Gras.
Sure.
You don't see people talking about balloon handlers anymore. I know Darren, who used to be a host on our show, he used to brag that he did it one year, but I haven't seen anybody talking about it for a long time.
Oh, that's interesting. If they continue with that holiday parade, I'd be surprised, because I know it's a thing they can monetize. I believe they do monetize it for Mardi Gras, that families can sign up for a dinner and parade thing, and I don't blame them. I think it's a tremendously fun opportunity, but there were times it takes so many people to handle one of those balloons, and I got to tell you, after doing it just a couple of times, I developed a whole new level of respect for the people that do that Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade and walk for, 3 miles? Some amazing, because first of all, and watch this. The next time you're watching that parade on TV, you got someone who's walking backwards the entire length of the parade, and they're looking at all the people holding the ropes, and they're pointing to them, and they're pointing in up, or they're pointing down, or they're making a safe sign like you'd see in baseball, because based on the wind and based on a host of other factors, they're directing people constantly to let rope out, bring rope in. Okay, you're good. Stay right there. And the same thing was happening to us. And our route was maybe a half mile, 3/4 of a mile. I don't know how long it was. I just thought it's not even the walking. That wasn't the thing. It's the paying attention, not bumping into other people. Yeah. Oh, I need to go up. Oh no, now go down. Oh wait, okay, I'm good. Oh wait, go back up. And you're doing this so many times that it's amazing to me that one person is responsible for however many rope pick points exist on each balloon. So that to me, I always found so much more fascinating after I did it. And Lee, you're talking about the things that people will never get to know, right?
Yeah.
One of my dear friends who I've worked with in a host of different venues, everything from theme parks to Renaissance festivals, for several years, got to play Jolly St. Nick in that holiday parade at Universal, right? The suit he wore is the same one that Santa wears during that Thanksgiving Day parade. He goes, it's shipped down in this special box. They've got an escort that comes with it.
Wow.
And he shows it. He shows it to me after he puts it on. He goes, I don't know what it is, but man, I put this thing on. I get a couple inches taller. There's just magic. There's electricity flying through this thing. And I got to tell you, when you look at it up close, that's the thing with costumes for stage and parade. You look at them up close and you're like, oh, that needs help. It was like, but this one, no, it was it was flawless. The buckles, the sable liner, everything was amazing. And honestly, the people lining the parade who are wondering how long it's going to last and if they have enough time to get another beer, they have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
We didn't know that.
No. Again, going back to like the balloon handling thing, I always thought it was a strange thing to let guests do, because it's like you said, it's not an easy task. And then just to give it to some random person who turned up to the parks that day just seems it seems very counterintuitive for Universal being safety conscious.
Well, I agree, Lee. It almost, to me, it's the theme park version of, did you ever, I know they do it in improv, the trust exercise, where you close your eyes and you fall. That's what it is. It's the theme park equivalent of the trust exercise. Everybody at Universal is closing their eyes and falling back and hoping that guest is going to catch it.
It seems like too much work, too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do that on my vacation. Like,
grab the random dad that just finished his beer. We need you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but if you think about it, there's a great deal of trust. I'm not going to speak to people's behavior post-pandemic, but I will say people by and large do the right things. They behave the way they're supposed to, and it's always great to see that when people get picked, when they're asked to say something on mic, and honestly, if that ever happens, they don't have a delay button in the booth. So if someone wanted to say, I probably shouldn't say this, in case someone picked, someone now is listening and going, oh, good, I'm going to look through whether I want someone out of the audience, because I am going to let loose with a volley of words that'll make my grandmother blush.
We're getting towards the end.
Oh my God! Really?
Yeah.
Has it already been 4.5 hours?
Yeah, we're right up there. Right up there. Now, we know you have many, many amazing, cool stories about working at the parks, and different things that you've done there. But could you give us one that you think our listeners will find either super funny or interesting, or something out there?
Oh yes.
All right.
Oh gosh. Well, let's see. I'm running because I prepared. I'm running through this Rolodex. Can I say no? No. I can't.
The Rolodex episode. I like this.
So yeah, the Rolodex episode. That's right. This is part of the extras, the behind the scenes. But a lot of things would happen at Wild West. For example, if you never saw the show, you wouldn't know, but for example, a safety piece, Ma Hopper falls backwards through the well, and Felix Cassidy says, "Oh well," you get it? Oh well, because you fell in the well. And while he's saying that and he's handing it up to the audience, the Brett Taylor character, me, I'd walk over and I'd look down in the well, and I'm looking down to make sure our Ma Hopper is okay. There's a pad she lands on, but still, the second set of eyes to make sure she's fine and everything is okay and we can continue with the show. And some of the Ma Hoppers would have as much fun at your expense as they could. And sometimes they would set props down there that were sometimes highly inappropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, your mind, you just go wherever you want to because it's probably accurate.
Wow.
And and then there was one Ma Hopper in particular who, when you'd lean over to check to make sure she was okay, somehow for some strange reason, one breast always flew out.
Oh my gosh.
And she would be laughing hysterically as you're looking down there trying to have a serious face because this woman just fell into a well and you want to make sure she's okay. Now you got to admonish your little buddy for making a joke about it. And meanwhile, this woman is at the bottom of a well on top of this padded fall pad, having just as much fun at your expense as possible.
That's so good. You guys were just literally trolling each other at that point.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That's awesome.
one of our Felix Cassidy's right before the start of the show, you would hear the intro for our music always happen right after one particular section of guest music, and then the tech would say, "All right, Felix and Brett, you're up." And this one particular Felix Cassidy would grab this rubber Bowie knife, which was, I don't know, the blade part was probably 10 inches long. And before you could react, he'd whack you in the arm a half a dozen times.
Ow.
And then laugh at you. And then he'd go running out the saloon doors before you could do anything about it. It's just the funniest thing in the world, and you can't get back at him because y'all are on stage, and by the time everything is done, it's funny and it's over. But he'd whack you in the arm a half dozen times, and then he was like, "What do you think about that?" Huh? And then he'd run out because his mic is hot. He doesn't care, and he would go to you, "Come on, what do you got? Come on!" And you'd
That's great.
Yeah, you'd launch into this fight sequence, and it doesn't even matter if you're not pulling your punches. His stomach's tight. He doesn't care. You're not going to hurt him. He's laughing at you the whole way. And, if you're not professional about it, you're just going to get angry. But at the end of the day, all of it was so darn funny to begin with.
Wow.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. My approval show, my first show with an audience, the first thing that happens is, I walk outside and I go out, and first thing I do is fire the gun in the air and say yeehaw. And because I've got because of my theatrical background, I can project, but I'm still expecting a mic, and the mic's not working. And now the mic's not working, and I'm going to have to. It's a 2,500 seat theater, so there's enough people that you got to make sure they hear you in the back seats. Yes. And nothing's still happening, and I'm starting to get inside my own head because this is my approval show. What if the directors who are all up there in the booth think I suck because my mic doesn't work? And I'm about to let loose with a son of a, and then the mic comes on. I was like, "Hey, howdy, folks." So that's great. That part happens. That's all. That's wonderful. Perfect. And I get through that part of the show to where I have to go. I go backstage because I'm looking for somebody, and while I go backstage, I tell Felix Cassidy, who's the comedic relief, he's in charge. And then I come back and I'm leaning on the saloon doors, and the saloon doors are just low enough to where you see your pecs and your shoulders, and you can kind of lean your arms on them, and you're talking to them, and it's supposed to be a casual, relaxed conversation while you're telling him that he's in charge. And during that show, my approval show, the guy that played Cole Hopper, Steve Mastro, he comes up behind me. I don't know any of this is happening. He comes up behind me, grabs my gun belt, and starts shaking me around like I'm caught in a washing machine agitator. And I'm trying to talk to Felix Cassidy to let him know that he's in charge, and I got to run back, and I'll be right out. And the whole time I'm hanging on for dear life, trying not to laugh, trying not to say anything that's not in the script. And as soon as I disappear, Steve's back there laughing his butt off. So yeah, stuff like that. I might have done a thing or two that sometimes was funny and other times was not so funny, but
you've got to amuse yourself somehow.
It's true. You just have to, it's an important, if it's a written rule in theater, I don't know it, but, and a really important rule in any kind of entertainment performance venue where you've got an audience is your inside jokes have to include the audience. Otherwise, don't do them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our inside jokes, if the audience had no idea what was happening, that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you originally said about that kind of family aspect of it, of the different performers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where you rag on, like, I have best friends that we just do dumb stuff to each other sometimes. And it's just, it's literally out of love. Like, we're just messing, we're having a good time. So it kind of goes back to you guys, messing with each other, obviously in a little bit of a higher stakes because you're also performing, but it's out of love. You guys are just messing around with family, basically.
Yes, I am. I'm a notorious practical joker, and I have two rules. One the first one is it can't be done out of malice. It has to be good natured, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is it's got to be funny. It's got to be fun. And as long as it meets those 2 points, can't be out of malice. Got to be fun, and it can't hurt anyone, right?
Yeah,
cannot hurt anybody. And one thing that I love to do is I'll take my old business cards for some stupid reason. I haven't thrown them all out. If I've got a bunch, especially if I know I'm going to someone's house, I will put like 10 business cards on each blade of their fan, especially if their ceiling fan isn't running. And then maybe come spring or summertime. I mean, that can't be the case now here in Florida, obviously, but I've done it in plenty of places in the winter, and then I'll get a phone call from someone a few months later. I was like, yeah, it's funny. My family was in, and they're just kind of warm. Turned the fan on, and it was raining men.
I think that needs to be my next marketing strategy for my team.
Yeah. You should really do it, Michelle, because it's honestly, I mean, I hide. I've got friends who I see all the time up in Orlando, and I'm constantly hiding cards everywhere. Maybe buried, and I've done this at a lot of people's places. I'll go to their houses. I'll hide them behind portraits, or I'll hide them in coffee mugs between plates.
Brilliant.
Coffee shops. I wonder if that'll go over well in a place of business.
Maybe.
Do it. They're not going to care.
They sure will remember my name. That's for sure.
They will.
Don't let her in ever again.
Hey, we're talking about marketing. I can't imagine what else you'd want. They remembered your name.
That's great. Well, speaking of marketing, it's about time to wrap up. So, Ron, do you have anything going on? Any upcoming productions? Anything that you would like to promote for yourself?
Oh my gosh, I love this. Thank you for asking. I'm also an audiobook narrator. I'm an author and an audiobook narrator. I'm working on several different books right now,
Awesome.
But currently I'm working on a series called The Long Lonely Road, and I'm on book 7 right now. It's by a pretty well-known prolific author named TJ Reader, and you can find those books on Audible, or if you wanted to find out more, listen to samples, or just learn more about me, you can go to my website, which is ronfoxmedia.com, and you can learn all about audiobooks and books I'm working on, and all other stuff you had thought you needed to know about me or didn't need to know about me, but there it is.
So let's put it out there right now, Ron. You need to write a book of stories of your time working at Universal Orlando, because I know there is a market out there for it, guaranteed.
Lee, would it surprise you to know I'm working on a book about stunts and experiences of both Universal, Disney, and
awesome.
And my time at Six Flags.
Well, let us know when it's finished, and we will definitely promote it on the show.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just translate that Rolodex into a book, and you got it. That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I really had to pick some of the stories that were appropriate for sharing on this medium, because there are some things that we've done backstage that absolutely can't be.
I'm sure
can't be shared.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ron.
And chit-chatting with us, Ron. That was awesome. And please finish that book, because I know the 4 of us, as well as probably 100 other producers in our producers club, will be buying that book for sure.
Count on it. I will keep you posted. And thank you very much for having me. This has been a tremendous amount of fun.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Yes. All right. Well, that's going to end another podcast, and we'll do so with another Universal Is. And of course, this week's comes from our special guest, Ron. But don't forget, we would like for you to get involved. Just let us know what you think Universal is. And 3 words or less, send them to podcast@uuopodcast.com. But for now, in this episode, Ron, it's over to you.
You would like to know what I think Universal is, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I think it is where magic lives.
All right, guys, that was it.
That was another episode of the Unofficial Universal Orlando Podcast, the best and only podcast about Universal Orlando on the island. Check us out on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. Just search UUO Podcast. For all the podcasts, news, and articles, check out our blog at uuopodcast.com. Contact us at podcast@uuopodcast.com. Join the Producers Club by emailing us at uuopproducers@gmail.com. Listen and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Check out our friends, the Theme Park Duo, for all your other theme park news, and email Michelle at portkeyvacations.net to book your next trip. So until next time, this is Amity 6, call off the Marines, we're coming home.